From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. The government of Lithuania is really feeling the pressure, which is where we begin tonight, even though Western correspondents have been forced to leave Lithuania and do their reporting from Moscow. But whether in Moscow or the Lithuanian capital Vilnius, it is really quite clear today that Mr. Gorbachev is having some success, undercutting the Lithuanian campaign for independence from the Soviet Union. Here's ABC's Jim Hickey.
It was as the Lithuanian parliament was meeting today that its leadership appeared to back down a little on the question of their independence. President Vytautas Landsbergis, for the first time, said his republic never expected immediate independence from the Soviet Union. We did not, he said, count on it. That concession came after President Gorbachev's tough weekend warnings that Lithuanians abandoned their push for independence, which he said would lead to a dead end and would have grave consequences. Gorbachev backed up his warning with yet another reminder that the Soviets always have force in reserve. The message was unmistakable. Still, that didn't scare off these supporters of the independence movement who protested outside the Lithuanian prosecutor's office today. That office had been occupied by Russian militia last week. In Moscow, the Supreme Soviet passed a bill designed to make things even more difficult for Lithuania, and makes the activity of any organization, such as the independence movement, which violates the integrity of the USSR, illegal. Previously, the law applied only to individuals. In the last few days, there has been a change in mood, both here in Moscow and in Lithuania itself. Lithuanians by no means have given up their dream of independence, but there is a feeling that Mr. Gorbachev is steadily gaining ground, one step at a time. Jim Hickey, ABC News, Moscow.
There was a pro-independence rally in Estonia today, the northernmost of the three Baltic republics. All three, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, want to be independent from Moscow. But Estonia is going about it differently at least from Lithuania, hoping that deliberate caution will prevent a confrontation with Moscow. ABC's Rick Inderfirth is in Estonia.
Estonians want the same thing Lithuanians want. A soggy but determined crowd gathered in the capital of Tallinn this afternoon, calling for independence. But the newly elected Estonian parliament hopes to avoid an open confrontation with Moscow and has not issued any Lithuanian-like declarations of independence. Instead, the parliament has declared that the republic has been illegally occupied by the Soviet Union and that a transition period will now begin, leading to a free and sovereign state. Estonians are making other profound changes, quietly laying the economic foundation for independence. Already more prosperous than any Soviet republic, they have plans well developed for the introduction of a market economy, an Estonian currency, and a new tax code. Still, there is a major obstacle in Estonia's path to independence. These ethnic Russians, who make up almost 30% of Estonia's population, oppose separation from the Soviet Union. There are twice as many ethnic Russians here as there are in Lithuania, and they do not want to risk suffering discrimination in jobs, housing, and education. Estonia's new leaders are trying to reassure them with special legislation to protect their rights. Estonia's nationalist leaders also know that if the fears and concerns of the native Russians living here are not met, Moscow could use that as an excuse to prevent Estonia's transformation from a Soviet republic to an independent nation. Rick Inderfirth, ABC News, Tallinn.
In Romania today, the brother of the late Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceausescu went on trial. Nicolae Andrutu Ceausescu is charged with mass murder as the former chief of a security police unit. Later this evening, by the way, on ABC, pictures never seen before of the events surrounding the fall and eventual execution of Nicolae Ceausescu. The Koppel Report, Death of a Dictator. It begins at 10:09 Central Time. In just a moment, the latest U.S.-Japanese trade talks open, with Tokyo offering concessions. And later in the broadcast, the world's largest casino. How large a gamble is it for one Donald Trump? And why you may soon no longer just watch television.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, brought to you by Post Fruit and Fiber.
There was something of a peace offering from Japan for the United States today. Almost half of last year's trade deficit, $49 billion, was with the Japanese. In an effort to bring that number down, U.S. and Japanese negotiators sat down in Washington again today. And as ABC's Stephen Ogg reports, the Japanese appear to be taking this round of talks especially seriously.
2 emissaries from Japanese Prime Minister Toshiko Kaifu were sent specially to give his views on the trade talks to Secretary of State James Baker today and later this week to President Bush. Mr. Bush said the Prime Minister telephoned him early today before the talks began.
I must say I've been encouraged by recent progress, but we'll wait and see now because there's more to follow soon on that.
The talks are considered critical to reducing the worsening trade frictions between the United States and Japan.
Both the United States and Japan should come up with concrete plan projected for the future to stem the tide of protectionism.
Reportedly, the Japanese are ready to make important concessions to open their markets. They include changing the rules that prevent large retailers from opening stores in Japan, tougher enforcement of antitrust laws to punish Japanese companies that unfairly refuse to buy from foreign companies. But it's not clear that the anticipated concessions are enough to satisfy Congress.
The test of any agreement, particularly with Japan, is what happens after the ink is dry.
Prime Minister Kaifu's personal intervention shows the importance the Japanese place on these talks. They fear if they're not successful, the result could be rising barriers to free trade here in their biggest market. Stephen Ogg, ABC News, Washington.
In Japan today, another free fall on the Tokyo stock market. One key index lost 6.6%, and that is the second biggest decline they've ever had. There was no carryover to the U.S. market. In New York, the Dow Jones Industrials lost about 6 3/4 points, and the trading was slow. Still on the subject of economics, gambling. On gambling, real estate developer Donald Trump opened his new casino, the Taj Mahal, in Atlantic City today. It is the world's largest casino. It apparently cost nearly $1 billion, which certainly makes it the most expensive. It is also an example of how Trump does business. Little of the money at stake is his own. Here's ABC's Alan Frank.
Is this the eighth wonder of the world? Or is this, as Donald Trump insists?
It's real estate, it's a hotel, it's everything, but it's really showbiz, and somehow it's just worked out well for me.
$14 million worth of chandeliers sparkle at the Taj Mahal. But as always with the Trump enterprise, the star attraction is Trump himself, who cultivates publicity as one of the world's richest men. And as is often the case with a Trump venture, he is providing the dazzle, while other people provide the dollars. To build the Taj Mahal, Trump borrowed $725 million, mostly by selling junk bonds paying 14% interest. He also invested $75 million, which he borrowed from a New Jersey bank. For the Taj Mahal to cover its interest payments, gamblers will have to lose more than $1 million a day. If they don't, the risk belongs to the creditors, not to Trump.
Donald Trump cannot lose. Donald Trump is not personally liable on any of this debt.
The Taj Mahal shines as Trump's slickest deal. Trump does hold title to some fancy properties, like the Plaza Hotel in New York and Trump's Castle Casino in Atlantic City. But many are heavily mortgaged, and eventually nearly $3 billion will have to be repaid to banks and bondholders.
The institutions that finance what I have, they happen to be in love with Donald Trump. But they're not in love with me because I'm a nice guy or anything. They're in love with me because everything I've done has been a tremendous winner.
How much of a winner is already a matter of some debate. In a public filing about the Taj Mahal, Trump certified that his net worth is at least $500 million. But his wife, who is suing for half his estate, claims he has $5 billion.
I have really trophy assets, and I guess they're disproportionately valuable because of the fact that they're trophies, but I have zero idea what I'm worth.
Whatever his worth, Trump has succeeded in insulating much of it from creditors, gambling mostly with investors' money and counting on his customers to lose theirs. Alan Frank, ABC News, New York.
Elsewhere in the country today, a 35-mile-long oil slick has contaminated the Allegheny River in Pennsylvania. More than 1 million people in the Pittsburgh area have been forced to fill reserve tanks and look for other sources of water. 200,000 gallons of fuel spilled into the river on Friday when a pipe broke in a landslide. We'll have more news in a moment. Our next report takes us back to the Dark Ages. And when it comes to AIDS, that wasn't very long ago. In 1985, a teenager named Ryan White learned that he had AIDS. And because he was a very brave young man, he forced millions of other people to face their own prejudices about the disease and the people it strikes. The differences between fact and fiction. Tonight, 18-year-old Ryan White is close to death in an Indianapolis hospital.
You ready to go to school, Ryan?
Ryan White's case led to a national debate on AIDS when his school district in Kokomo, Indiana, refused to allow Ryan to go to school with other kids. He was forced to take classes at home, and other kids made his life even more miserable. Ryan and his mother decided to fight back. They went to court, and after a bitter fight, Ryan won the right to attend classes. But by the summer of 1988, Ryan and his mother had had enough of Kokomo, so they left and moved to Cicero, Indiana. Ryan seemed to understand the people of Kokomo.
Well, I think they were scared first and foremost, and it just led to where, you know, their fear just took control of them, and they just believed what they wanted to believe.
In the Hamilton Heights School District, where there had been a massive community education program about AIDS, Ryan was welcomed instead of shunned. Ryan had always had it rough. As a child hemophiliac, any bruise or cut could have been fatal. Ryan learned to fight early on, and he never stopped, and he never lost his faith.
I believe that when you die, you go to a better place. I mean, I believe in God and everything, and I'm not really afraid of dying.
Profile in courage. The Republican Party Chairman Lee Atwater is in a New York hospital tonight where he will receive a new kind of radiation treatment for a brain tumor. The tumor was discovered a month ago. Doctors then called it non-malignant, but they say it is a type of tumor that can be cancerous. There is another study of American students out today that provides what one historian calls fresh evidence for despair. The Education Department tested elementary and high school students on civics, including the basics of history and government. Many students showed little grasp of either. Here's ABC's Jean Meserve.
27,000 students were surveyed 2 years ago. Only 5% of high school seniors had a working knowledge of American history. Only 6% really understood the American political system. Knowledge of fundamental facts was lacking at all grade levels. 64% of fourth graders could not identify Adolf Hitler. 66% of eighth graders didn't know what the Emancipation Proclamation was. Although the survey was taken at the height of the 1988 presidential campaign, 64% did not know that presidential candidates were nominated by national conventions. 50% did not know that the U.S. is a representative democracy. And more than half of 12th graders did not know that religious freedom is guaranteed by the Constitution.
Our own youngsters, who stand less than a year away from voting booths, have as a group a tenuous grasp of institutions and ideals that make freedom possible.
Experts found the results ironic in light of recent democratic advances in Eastern Europe and elsewhere.
Millions of people outside our borders possess a keener sense of the importance of these things than do our own sons and daughters.
98% of 12th graders did know that those accused have a right to a lawyer, but that may have more to do with what they see on television than what they learn in the classroom. Jean Meserve, ABC News, Washington.
Some other international news. The British Home Secretary told Parliament today that the rioting in the streets of London on Saturday was the work of troublemakers bent on violence. The trouble started after a peaceful demonstration protesting the new British poll tax. Mobs fought with police, looted stores, set fires. 374 police officers were hurt, as were 86 civilians. The Iraqi President Saddam Hussein admitted for the first time today that his country does have nerve gas weapons. Everybody knew it. And he threatened to use them against Israel if Israel should attack Iraq. 9 years ago, Israeli planes destroyed an Iraqi nuclear reactor. Last week, Iraq was accused of trying to illegally obtain nuclear weapons parts from the U.S. The State Department called Hussein's comments today irresponsible and outrageous. In South Africa today, the government is trying to stop some of the very worst black-on-black violence. South African President F.W. de Klerk announced plans to send additional police and troops to the province of Natal, where 400 people have been killed in the past 2 months. Nelson Mandela was in Natal today, where he promised that the African National Congress, one of the factions involved in the fighting, would do what it could to stop it. When we come back, what is really at stake in tonight's championship basketball game? Well, in college basketball, it is the night of the big game, Duke against Nevada, Las Vegas for the NCAA championship. As we said, it's the big game, and when the shouting is over, some will argue too big. Here's ABC's Dick Schaap.
Symbolically, it is the perfect matchup. Squeaky clean Duke, haven of the scholar athlete, against always suspect Nevada, Las Vegas, rebels by nickname and image. Never mind that the perception is flawed, that Greg Anthony of Las Vegas, who wants to be a senator, seems as much a scholar athlete as any Duke Blue Devil. The contrast is fitting because it reflects the beauty and the beast nature of the NCAA championship. It is exciting, dramatic, pure theater, but it is played for stakes so high, the integrity and future of the game are threatened. CBS is paying $1 billion for 7 years of NCAA basketball. Coaches are earning hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for coaching, running camps, and telling their players which brand of sneakers to wear.
These young athletes today, you know, they're not stupid. They read about coaches' contracts. They read about NCAA tournament money. And, you know, they often wonder, you know, why can't we get a little piece?
Cremens and many other coaches favor paying college players as much as several $100s a month beyond their present scholarships to reduce the risk of illegal under-the-table payments. Those payments have come from coaches who must win or risk losing lucrative jobs, from alumni, from agents, and most ominously, from gamblers. 40 years ago, a widespread scheme to fix games deeply scarred college basketball.
If it could happen in 1950, when a dime was coming into the sport, why can't it happen in 1990 when $1 billion is coming into the sport?
The money is very definitely a corrupting influence, and I think that they must address this and must realize that we cannot have the so-called $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 free throw.
That is the potential price of a free throw that puts a school in or out of the Final Four. One suggested safeguard against scandal: reduce the stakes, spread the TV money among hundreds of NCAA schools. Even though Duke, like UNLV, will receive almost $1.5 million fee for participating in tonight's game, its athletic director insists,
I'm one of those that would greatly support a reduction 15% a year in the participation fees, so that 7 years from now, we literally would be playing for the trophy.
Imagine playing only for a trophy, just like amateurs. Dick Schaap, ABC News, Denver.
We'll be back in just a moment.